What's up, guys? It is mid-April. The bite is on fire all over the Midwest, and we've got your latest fishing reports for Lake of the Ozarks, Table Rock Lake, and Truman Lake.
Plus, from the Kansas Angling Experience, Brian Ondrejka joins us to talk about how he's found success as a multi-species, multi-lake fishing guide, and how he's become an authority on the internet for all things live scope fishing.
This is the Tackle HD podcast. Let's get right to it. Here's Jack Uxa with your Lake of the Ozarks fishing report.
Hey guys, it's Jack Uxa with your Tackle HD fishing report for Lake of the Ozarks. It's beginning part of April here. Got a nice day. It's sun is shining for a change. Since the last report, water temperatures kind of like, well, they shot up in the early part of March, and then they kind of stabilized and went down a little bit, and now we're starting a warming trend again. Water temperatures are going to start to rise. The tournaments have been insane here this past weekend. A couple buddies of mine, Rob and Ben, Bass and Rob, and Ben Veerhoff had back-to-back 25-pound bags out of Lake of the Ozarks, which is just insane. Congratulations to those guys. They killed it this weekend. Me and Bass and Bob fished on Saturday. We had 17 pounds or just under 17 pounds. We had a pretty good day. Had a couple 5-pounders. We were catching them on spinner baits. I was throwing an E-Factor spinner bait, but I've also got some great spinner baits here. This is the Ozark Flash spinner bait from Tackle HD. This one's got those funny blades on it to where half of the blades are painted, the other half is left either gold or silver. This has been a great spinner bait, especially once we get a little bit more dirty water. That's going to be a killer. By and large, Lake of the Ozarks is pretty clear. Usually this time of year, I actually want to find a little dirty water, and it's been a little hard to find. You get some sunshine like I got today, they like to go shallow. I want to catch them shallow, but it's been hard to do that. It hasn't been, it's not like you just pull up to a bank and expect to catch fish and in shallow water. You got to cover a lot of ground. That's why the spinnerbait's been so good. I've also been catching a lot of fish on crankbaits. This is the crankhead. This is a very good wiggle wart style crankbait. It dives a little bit deeper than the wiggle warts. This is a color that I'll have out when you get some dirty water. This is a little bit shallower diving crankbait. This is one that you can cover a lot of ground with and make a lot of casts. And this is a great square bill crankbait, just like all the other square bill crankbaits. You got to have a good set of these things to have in your tackle box so you can cover a lot of ground. If they're shallow, you need to go and move. This is not the time of year where you got to slow down anymore. This is the time of year you can have a little bit stronger line. 15 to 17 pound test, especially on your spinner baits, even 20 pound test on your spinner baits. Maybe go down as light as 12 pound on your crankbaits, but no less than that. And you're going to have to bounce off a lot of rocks. You're going to have to make a lot of casts, trying to make your cast parallel to the bank, just so you can cover as much water as you possibly can. For the most part, it's been good. I mean, there's some big ones biting. Like I said, we had a couple 5-pounders. Several guys have been doing pretty good. And, really, I got to talk about the Alabama rig still. This is the Tackle HD Swimmers. These guys are awesome. This right here is probably my favorite color, Isle of Wight. It's been awesome. These things, I talked about it a couple weeks ago in the last report I did, how they've got a special, they swim different than other spinnerbait or other swim baits. And this is what a lot of the big bags have still been coming on, is the old Alabama rig. You try to put it down, and for the most part, a lot of these big fish throughout most of the lake are still deep, and they have not committed to the shallow water yet. And that's both good and bad. For the guys that like to fish deep, you got to stick this thing in your hand and keep going with it, because this will catch some good ones. I'm about to start a guide trip here this afternoon, and that's primarily what we're going to be throwing, that and a jerkbait. Tackle HD has got a fiddlesticks. This is the loudest jerkbait I know of. It's they come in 2 packs. A lot of their baits, hard baits, will come in 2 packs. If you get 2 for the price of 1. This has been a good color. I've also been throwing, I forget what they call it, but it's like a sexy shad or a Tennessee shad. That's been probably my number one color out of the fiddlesticks. They've got two sizes. This is the regular size, and then they got one that's a little bit larger. The jig bite has been kind of a disappointment for me, but I know it's coming. It's early April. These fish are going to want to slow down here pretty soon, and they're going to want to start to move closer to their spawning locations. They're going to get more on docks. That's where little jigs like this are going to be very, very important. This is a finesse jig. This is also a finesse jig. This is, I buy a lot of these stealth jig heads from these guys, and they just catch a lot of fish. This one I put some living rubber around there, and you know, when they're wanting to go slow, that's the deal, and that's just around the corner. Carolina rig is going to be just around the corner too. Water temperatures will get above 50 degrees here real soon. They are starting to get above 50 degrees in certain little areas on certain afternoons. So, you know, it's getting closer to the spawn. You'll start to see some fish on beds normally about mid-April, and the majority of the fish will be on beds at the end of April. So keep that in mind. And I've also got this boat that's going to be for sale here. This is Nitro Z21 Silver. Got a Verado 250 on it, live scope, 12-inch, Ultrex. It's a great boat. If you're interested, give me a call, 573-434-2570. Thanks.
Now we throw it over to Matt Fielder for this week's look at Table Rock Lake.
This is Matt Fielder with MJF Guide Service and Modern Outdoor Tackle, giving you your mid-April fishing report for Table Rock Lake. Our lake level right now is 916.04. That's about a foot high of normal pool. They're dumping beaver, so we're getting their excess water, and so it's filling up Table Rock. This week on my guide trips, there hasn't been a lot of wind up until today, so I've been focusing offshore a lot. I'll be looking for birds, finding big balls of shad, and finding the bass underneath the shad. I've been throwing a Freedom Tackle turnback shad to catch those fish. If for some reason they won't eat the turnback shad, I'll go to a swim bait, whether it be a Ki-Tak or a Tackle HD swimmer. Sometimes I will Demiki rig them. One of those three baits will get the job done. They'll normally eat it. It may take a couple tries, but they will eat it. If that's not something that you want to do, if you don't want to go live scope fishing, there are fish on points. They're stacking up pretty good on points. You can go on points and throw a Ki-Tak or a Tackle HD swimmer. You can either, scrub it off the bottom, or you can fish it suspended. Really good ways to catch fish right now. If they're not on the middle of the point, they'll be off to the side of the point. It seems like for some reason the shad are kind of pushed off to the side. So if you're not catching them in the middle of the point, try off the side of the point. Another good way to catch them right now is throwing a football jig on bluff ends. Bluff ends are really key right now, catching a lot of fish on a football jig paired up with a Tackle HD speed bug. It's been catching a lot of fish for me. You can also fish the football jig on channel swing banks, so a little bit steeper bank, 45s or a little bit steeper. Just drag the jig down the bluff and you'll be catching them. Another way to catch them right now is a crankbait, either the Tackle HD crankhead or the Spro rock crawler, but you're gonna need wind for that bite. The wind is really, really, really key for that bite. You'll wanna find main lake points, secondary points, or channel swing banks with wind just pounding it. That's gonna be your best way to catch them on a crankbait. If you guys are a spinnerbait kind of guy, then find a little bit dirty water and go up there and find some wind-blown banks or wind-blown points, and you'll catch them on a spinnerbait. So thanks for listening. Come back and see us next week.
That's Matt Fielder with the latest at Table Rock Lake. Now with your Truman Lake report, here's Dave McCormick.
Well, welcome back, gang. This is an every 2-week deal, and it's your Truman Lake fishing report. I'm Dave. I'm just a nutty tournament angler and a YouTube content producer. If you If you haven't seen me before, check us out at Fish 30 on YouTube. I think we're up to about 109 tournament videos. So you like that kind of content, we're the kind of place you need to be. So I was actually fishing today. Today is Tuesday, and I worked till about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and Gary and I decided that we needed to go on that warm day to go down to Truman. And we had a pretty good day. I'm going to tell you, we caught quite a few fish. The lake's a little torn up. It's a little dirtier, and they're pulling the lake fairly hard to get it to come down. So I'm glad that it's not up in the bushes. I don't like it to come up into the bushes until those fish are actually pulled up to spawn. And they are not yet. The water's, I think the coldest I saw was around 51, and the warmest was 54-ish. So good range there. Fish are finally pulling up. Various baits are working. Moving baits seem to be working better. I can't tell you why the jig didn't work today, but it didn't. It should be working. But your crankbaits, round bill or a square bill, something shallow, something you can throw right up to the bank. We even caught some fish on stick bait. So I'd tell you, even after this cold front, don't be afraid to use a stick bait. We didn't do very well on the spinner bait, but we had a couple buddies that were out in a boat doing the same thing, just different area, and they reported catching quite a few fish on a spinner bait, way in the very backs of the pocket. So give that a spin, give that a shot. I think this cold front's may stifle the way in the very, very, very back bite on Saturday. Saturday morning's gonna be cold. So you may have to pick something where the bank is a little steeper, a little bigger rock, a little steeper angle. Sometimes those fish pull out of those super shallow areas to the very first steeper area and wait until the temperatures are right for them to push back into that spawning area. So I'm going to be out there. I know there's going to be 200 to 300 high school anglers on Sunday, and quite a few of them with their captains fishing in a tournament on Saturday. So this weekend's going to be busy. Everybody's got to be courteous. And the lake is at a level where I consider it to be a little dangerous because you really can't see it. It's like it's 707, 708. So you really can't see the timber. So that gives some people a false sense of security. Don't run in and out of the pockets on this body of water unless you really know it. There can be standing timber in quite a few of these pockets. So we don't want you to tear anything up. Truman is a great fishing lake, but it can be hard on your gear. So don't let that happen to you. So if you think it's okay to stand up, idle another 50 yards. That's my general consensus to anybody, even my friends who think they know it. Idle another 50 yards, then stand up where you are sure it's safe. So, have a good time, get out there, use your moving baits. I don't know why the jig isn't working. I'm gonna be throwing it though. Every hour or so, I'm gonna be checking it. Give it a shot, try the square bill, try the round bills, shallow crankbait, the flat sides. I think you'll have some success. Till 2 weeks from now, we'll have another Truman Lake fishing report. Good luck to you. Be safe on the water.
Rod, fish, pull the rod out of my hand, dude, it's huge. Serious, there's a fish there.
Okay, Brian Ondrejka, welcome to the Tackle HD podcast, sir. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Okay, so I noticed behind you, it looks like basketball is on, and my timing on this was maybe not the best because you are a Kansas guy, and right this very minute, Kansas is playing in the men's NCAA championship game
Big time.
against North Carolina. So thank you for taking time to do this.
It's on. Yeah, no, I'm trying to adjust my camera so maybe everyone who's watching isn't going to pay attention to the game that they're probably watching right now or have already watched.
That's fantastic. Well, good luck to Kansas on your behalf. Behind me, a little different story. These are the Tackle HD retail displays, which just in the last couple of weeks have been arriving at Walmart stores all over the Midwest, which is a pretty cool thing. From basically like mid-Missouri down through Arkansas, you can find these in the fishing aisle. First time Tackle HD has been in Walmart. Super exciting for our company. They're carrying 3 different products. They're carrying our signature crawdad, the high def craw 4-packs, which we've never offered before. These 4-packs you can get for under $5 at Walmart. And then we've got 2 sizes of the Hellgrammite, the 3.5-inch Nedmite and the 5-inch Hellgrammite. So be looking for these if you are in Missouri down through Arkansas. And of course, if you're not in those areas, the website right down below there, tacklehd.com, is where you can get all that stuff and more. But Brian, today is all about you and your very unique business. You are a full-time guide in Kansas.
Yep.
Let's jump right into that. What's your background as far as fishing goes? How did you kind of get started with this, and what was kind of your path to full-time guide?
Yeah, you bet. So I was born and raised in just outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a little suburb. We moved down to Kansas in 2000, so we've been here quite a long time. We moved here when I was like 12. I'm 34 now. Obviously, in Wisconsin, it's kind of a way of life. Always grew up going to the North Country with my dad and my grandparents and my entire family, and just probably 6 blocks from the Milwaukee Harbor. And having grown up in Wisconsin, that's just, one thing. Growing up in Wisconsin versus down here is kind of, down here I've kind of found that most people gravitate towards one species year round, whereas like where I'm from, it's a seasonal thing. So it's like spring is we got the spring walleye run, and then after that comes the crappies and the perch, and then in the summertime, and I mean, it's anybody's guess as to whatever you want to fish for. So we always just bounced around. So when we moved to Kansas, like the first lake, for example, right outside of the Kansas City area, is just like first time I ever saw it, giant mud hole, lots of trees, lots of standing timber. And then people are telling me that there's walleyes in it. And I'm like, there's no way. Like I grew up on these glacial lakes moving down to, impounded rivers and reservoirs and whatnot, and dirty water and timber and stuff. And it took us a while to kind of figure out what was going on. It's a huge culture shock going from, like I said, glacial lakes, super clear, lots of vegetation and stuff like that, deep, rock bars and everything, and just deep, clear basin lakes versus reservoirs that have old road beds and fence lines and standing timber and stuff, and trying to figure out like, well, is a walleye anywhere, or what are we doing? So it took a while to kind of figure out, obviously getting intel from just the people we know. I mean, this was back before Facebook groups and forums and things blowing out bites everywhere and stuff like that. But once we did get it figured out, it was super fun. Took a while. Like I said, I was just a teenager back then. I kind of stepped away from fishing for a little bit. I was big time into skateboarding, but obviously the fishing aspect never left, and doing a lot of filming and editing in that respect too. And then probably about 8 to 10 years ago, got back into fishing heavy, and had stepped away from skateboarding just because that at the time in my 20s, obviously was not paying the bills. Just like fishing. It's like I can get sent all these rods, reels, tackle and stuff, but it's not really paying the bills.
Right.
So then once I got heavy into fishing, it's like anything that I kind of put my mind to, whether it's like skateboarding, filming or editing or fishing, I'm kind of hyper focused. It's like whatever I've always been told from various people, like my fiance and my parents and just friends, anything that I really truly kind of get dialed in on, I put 100% effort into that. And that's kind of where I was like, well, growing up in Wisconsin, fishing guiding is a completely saturated market. There's like 500 fishing guides up there. In Kansas, when I started thinking about it, there were like 4 or 5. So I'm like, well, I think I could really do this, having gotten dialed into those specific bites and taking my friends out and stuff, and realizing like there's nobody on the lake that I got on, 10 minutes from my house. So that's when I really got really heavy into it and just launched a Facebook page. And I guess the rest is history.
So you launched a Facebook page to just kind of show off what you were doing and just kind of throw it out there. Like if anybody's looking for a guided trip.
Yeah. It was completely, because it's just like anybody else. What do you have to lose? You know, it's like we just put the Facebook page. I was still working full time. My background from a career standpoint was in the IT industry, so I always kind
Okay.
of have had that technological background. And then from there, you know, it was like, well, I was always trying to figure out ways to get out of work to go fishing, and it's, well, how can we like kind of do one and the same, like make a living fishing. And I did that for part-time, still worked full-time obviously, and just did guiding on the weekends and then evenings during the summertime for 3 years, maybe almost four. And now we're
Mhm.
in year 7, and I've been doing it full-time since March of 2019. And go ahead.
Was there a moment where you were getting so much business that it's like, I'm going to have to start turning business away unless I step away from this full-time job? Is that what pushed you into the full-time thing, or did you just kind of take the leap of faith and just start hustling more and more?
No, no, I mean, as much as I wish that I could say it was like that, that would be the ultimate hero story, to say that I left like a full-time great job at the University of Kansas working in IT with benefits. But so what actually got me to that point was, I worked for, he was a good buddy of mine, a full-time YouTuber who now has a massive YouTube channel. I mean, this was like 3.5 years ago that it was just getting going, hitting 100,000 subscribers, but he needed somebody to edit, film, and help film and edit all of his videos.
Okay.
And we were good buddies. I'd taken him fishing. So I worked with him for about 8 or 9 months, and we parted ways. And after we'd parted ways, I was like, well, having been in the fishing industry for this long, I don't really see myself going back to a desk job. So I've already had this guide business, you know, for 4 years, 3.5, 4 years, something like that. Let's see what happens if we just do it full time. And then from there, it's just exploded. So that was the silver lining of us parting ways, is that I was given the opportunity to book 5 or 6 out of 7 days a week guiding.
Right.
And now, you know, we're running between 300 and 320 trips a year, or be at least being on the water. So
Wow.
it's pretty gnarly. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, the other plus obviously is you were getting all that experience with video editing and figuring out this YouTube game, which is a puzzle to put together,
Right.
especially
It still
in those
is.
early
Yeah.
days, man. I mean, it's constantly changing, but you were able to do that elsewhere. So then when it was time to do it on your own, you've got several years experience under your belt.
Right. Yeah. And that's where I always try, and I always forget too when I do podcasts like this and talk about my past, is kind of forget to tie in the skateboarding aspect, because I did that for almost 17 years. But that whole time I was doing the same filming and editing. So I had that experience. And then I actually filmed a buddy's wedding and edited it for him. And he was like, this was right when GoPros came out. He's like, hey, do you care if I just pay you, you know, with like a GoPro or two? That I was like, dude, that's awesome. And that was right around the time that GoPros got really popular with fishing, you know, where it was just kind of like, you just set your GoPro on the dash and just go fishing. There was no
Mhm.
vlogging. There was no talking to the camera. You were
Mhm.
just catching fish, showing it to the camera, throwing it back, next clip. So then I just kind of graduated from there, because like my old YouTube channel days, like if you go way back on my channel, is literally just that. It's just straight. There's no talking. I'm not talking about what I'm using or what I'm doing. We're just catching fish.
Mhm.
And then as YouTube progressed in that respect, then I got more comfortable with like talking to the camera
Mhm.
and everything, which was like so weird back then. It's still kind of weird sometimes. But that's just like being a fishing guide. You're not just a fishing guide. You're in the hospitality industry. You have to be good with talking to
Yeah.
people. And that, having been in the IT industry, or, you know, hospitality or whatever, talking to people on the phone or people that I don't know, is something I've always been comfortable with. So it's just kind of all progressed from there. And that's why I kind of, especially having, just being a younger guy, you know, it's like I hear all these horror stories about all these old guides that people have been on, trips people have been on, you know, they don't talk, they just put you on fish, or they're falling asleep, or they're
Mhm.
wasted from the night before. So
That's
that's kind of
funny.
where I set myself apart, is just like being able to get along with everybody in the boat, because there's nothing more weird than being on a guided fishing trip, you know, that somebody may only do once in their whole lifetime, and not getting along with the guy that is in the boat with them.
Or
So
just an awkward 6 hours.
right,
Just
yeah, it's
you and
just like,
somebody that you're just not clicking with.
yeah. So that, I forgot where I even went with that, but yeah, that's kind of been the progression of things so far. And the YouTube channel is just for fun. You know, I'll never be a full time YouTube or anything like that. The YouTube channel has gained a lot of traction over the last couple of years, having been gotten on Garmin's pro staff and doing a lot of live scope stuff, which has gotten really popular on YouTube too. So yeah, it's just like I'm lucky to put out 1 to 3 or 4 videos a month just when I have time, but
Okay.
always be the, core aspect of fishing, full-time fishing guide, and just make those videos for fun.
That's interesting because you are, last I checked, you are well over 20,000 followers on there. So you're well past, I'm sure, the point that this can be a monetized thing for you.
Right.
But you have at this point in time, you have no intention of hitting that harder to try and make that more of a source of income. It's just a fun thing.
Yeah, and it's just like I keep thinking about just my customer base from a fishing guide perspective, that I'd say conservatively like 60 to 70% of my business on, a 300 trip a year basis is all almost repeat business. And having done it for so long, I have people that have been out with me since 2015, my very first year of guiding, that make it a point to, I've watched their kids grow up. And it's just always so tough to think about, like, I've taken kids out guys out that are taking their kids out fishing for the first time, and I've taken adults out who are taking their parents out for the last time. You know what I mean? So when you put it in perspective like that, it's like, being so young now and just having been doing it for 7 years, it's so hard to just think about walking away from just that whole thing. It's so weird. I have to like stop myself and think about it from time to time, of just stuff like that. Because when I say it like that to other people too, it's just like, wow, that's gnarly. You know what I
It
mean?
really is. I mean, you were offering and providing a very important experience to people's lifetime memories.
Right.
It's
Right. So that's why,
it's something to take seriously.
That's why I say all that was to say that, like, for now, I'm pretty comfortable with, just the grind, which I don't even really like that term very much, because when you say the grind, it's like a tournament grind, like, oh my gosh, I had a tough day.
Yeah.
I didn't cash a check. I didn't make the check line. And now we're driving, 5,000 miles back across the country, losing money. It's like, for me, this is all still just for fun. And it's so weird to think about that I am a full-time fishing guy, and I've done it for 4 years full time, and for 7 years, entirely. So I was just trying to keep myself grounded in that respect.
Well, it's unique in that, as I'm looking you up, you advertise yourself as not only a multi-species guide, but a multi-lake guide. According to your website, there are 4 different lakes that you are working as a professional guide on, and that is not common. It's usually somebody's a guide at Table Rock or at Lake of the Ozarks or at Truman Lake. Those are the reports that were on this episode. Those guys, to my knowledge, are only guiding on those lakes. How on earth are you able to stay on top of what the hot bite is on 4 different locations? That's a lot to keep track of.
It's really just all time on the water. And like, I kind of came up loving that expression, but I've also kind of grown into it thinking that I hate that expression, because there's so many guys that are like, oh, well, that's what you would say, when you learn a lake, it takes time on the water. Well, I don't have time on the water, I work full time. But it's all just wherever the bite is, because the difference between Kansas lakes and Missouri lakes, like Table Rock, Truman, Lake of the Ozarks, Palm, Stockton, stuff like that, that's big water. In Kansas, we're talking about 6,000 to 7,000 acre reservoirs that fish really small.
Okay.
So like my main lake just outside of town where I live, I'd say I probably do like 80% of my guide trips on that lake.
Okay.
And it's because we've got everything: walleye, sauger, largemouth, smallmouth, crappie, white bass, wipers, catfish. I'm not a catfish guy. We catch them on accident, obviously. But, and then, like, a couple of the other lakes. 2 of those lakes are some of the best smallmouth lakes in the northeast part of the state. One of them is the premier largemouth lake in the state. They've got Florida strain bass. It's a power plant lake. It really only fishes good in the wintertime, like most power plant lakes, where, cruddy weather and stuff like that usually plays into effect, as far as what your bite window is looking like. So yeah, it's wherever the bite's at, so if one's hitting better than the other, if my home lake 5 minutes from my house is fishing weird, like in a, spring or fall kind of transition or dog days of summer, I'm going to suggest to the customer, maybe we drive an hour to this lake or whatever. So it's
What
just all about
what are
them.
the four that you typically fish?
Clinton Lake, just outside of Lawrence, on the Kansas side here, and then Melbourne Lake, which is about an hour south, which is one of the premier smallmouth bass fisheries in the northeast part of the state. Lacine, which is the coal power plant lake, just south of Kansas City, which has got the Florida strain largemouth. One of my best buddies that makes a lot of my crappie baits and wiper baits. He's got the lake record there. It's like just shy of 11 pounds, 10 pounds, 15 ounces in a tournament even.
Wow.
So
It's a big day.
that's got the largemouth. And then Coffee County Lake, or Wolf Creek, which is the nuclear power plant lake, which is literally just has everything. It's got some of the biggest smallmouth in this part of the state too. Being that it's a power plant lake, all those fish were put in there to, control the shad and everything. And the limits are very strict. So it's a trophy fishery and we treat it as such. But yeah, it fishes well in the wintertime. So those would be the four that I got on.
So those power plant lakes, one's a nuclear power plant. Those
Mhm.
those lakes are owned by those utility companies?
Correct.
Is that how
Yeah.
that works?
So
Okay.
they have their own set of rules too. Like Coffee County, it runs north south just like Lacey and the coal power plant, but it's a deep lake and that area of the state gets extremely windy. And I mean, people have died there, so you've always got to wear a life jacket. They give you a little walkie-talkie to take out. So they've got a wind
Really?
restriction. If it's blowing 17 miles per hour sustained or more, you can't get on the lake or they'll call you off. Stuff like that. So it keeps
Interesting.
a lot of the pressure off, for the most part. But yeah,
And the thing
that's
with power plant lakes, it's typically warmer water. Isn't that
right.
isn't that right? Okay.
Right. Yeah. The nuclear power plant will always traditionally be warmer because it's always pulling water into the plant to cool down the nuclear reactor and then pumping that warm water back out. The coal power plant is the Kansas City Power and Light District power plant. So,
Mhm.
it's like if people are running their air conditioners or heaters or whatever,
Mhm.
that's when it's running. And they actually changed out one of the stacks a couple of years ago to be a more high efficient or kind of green stack. So it actually doesn't pump out the warm water like it used to, and that has affected the fishing over the last 3 or 4 years. So just things to consider. I mean, those big bass still live there. They're not, but that if we're talking about lake pressure, that is one of the most pressured lakes in the entire state because
I've heard that.
people know 10 to
I've heard that
15 pound largemouth.
with power plant lakes in general. I was
Right.
watching Randy Blockett,
Yeah.
the guy on YouTube. He was
I've
talking
heard of
about
them,
power
but
plant lakes, and that's what he said. He said it's I don't typically like to fish them. I've done it 7 or 8 times in my life, but he said it's typically you go out there and it's like a boat show. And
right.
that's I like that analogy. It's like
It's
a
true.
boat
It's
show out
true.
there.
Well, and it's like it's either really, really good or really bad. There's no in between.
Why is that, you think?
I mean, it like I said, it has a lot to do with weather. It's
Mhm.
you play the game, especially on Coffee County, the nuclear power plant, of the weather's going to be bad. Okay, what's the wind going to blow? Is it going to
Mhm.
blow 15 to 20? You can call the gatehouse in the morning and see if they're letting boats on, but by that time it's already too late because you're only generally going to have a really good bite window there, and it's going to probably be first thing in the morning. So
Okay.
you don't want to be the guy that slept in, called there, see if they're letting boats on, because there's probably already 15 boats out there throwing Ned rigs, and every smallmouth in the lake has seen it. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
I
So,
hear you.
but
So what are most of your clients after? What do you find? Are they after first of all, what type of fish, and are they looking for numbers? They just want somebody that can help them catch fish all day long, or are they looking for size? Are they just after that personal best and they're willing to hire somebody like you to get that for them?
I feel like it's mostly, I mean, it's just like any other fishing guide. They just want to catch fish.
Mhm.
But I have kind of like segmented groups of customers now, especially with, like a big time regular customer base where my regulars that I have out 3 or 4 times a year, they may just want to go hog hunting. They know the risk versus the reward. They know that we may only have 4 or 5 bites in the course of 6 hours, but they're probably going to be big ones. Whereas, like the regular weekend Joe who just wants to take his kids out, they don't care if it's drum, they don't care if it's crappie, they don't care if
Right.
it's white bass, whatever. And then there's another group which kind of gets lumped into the regulars and new customers, guys that just want to learn. Because now with the YouTube channel, I've kind of become the Northeast Kansas, or even Kansas as a whole in general, Garmin aficionado, especially with live scope. And that all just came from the YouTube channel, because there were like, whenever Garmin first started putting out their marine units, there were no tutorials on YouTube, no hands-on, nothing from Garmin even. And I remember sitting next to my fiance 3.5 years ago in the wintertime, and I was like, it was after a guide trip, and I was just like, gosh, I feel like I have to go to the lake and film this video where I just talk to the camera for 15 minutes about this unit. And I was like, it's not what I'm used to, because I'm not fishing. It's a tutorial, but I feel like it could do well. And that video's now got like 300,000 views on my channel. And that was the very first like Garmin tutorial that's come out. So now I've kind of played into the YouTube algorithm of, it's got to be Garmin stuff. It's got to be live scope stuff. And if you include both of those with crappies, like we do in the wintertime, it's game over. But that being said, I do offer electronic sessions in my customers' boats for 2 hours, to get in their boat, help them get dialed in on the settings and everything. So it's really just a learning thing, because even if we have a tough day, as you probably found out in this podcast, I like to talk, and I like to talk a lot, and it helps people just feel more comfortable and absorb what we're doing, because you learn more on the tough days than you do the days where the fish are just jumping in the boat, which is, I like dumb fish too, but I like to teach and educate people, so that I mean, a lot of my regular customer base, they have boats of themselves, and they go out and fish all the time, but they just want to learn and apply that stuff to their own fishing world. So
Absolutely. The Garmin Live Scope thing is just such a game changer for the fishing industry. When did you first start using it?
probably like a year and a half after it came out. And I'll leave the internet to call me out on this, because I wasn't against it, but I wasn't guiding full time. I was still on a budget. I wasn't sponsored by Garmin at the time, and that's an investment.
Right.
When it comes to, like, at the time when it came out, the transducer by itself was $1,500. Then you had to have a compatible unit. Then you're looking at $2,500. And I was kind of stubborn and just like, well, I can go out and do this without live scope and whatever. And then I finally made the jump and got it. And now it's just another tool on your boat, because it doesn't make fish jump in the boat, but it cuts that learning curve in half, and it cuts your scanning water time in half. You're never fishing dead water and stuff. So it has been a game changer, and especially just trying to figure out different ways to get fish to bite if they won't go, and figuring out how the fish react to certain baits. Like, I could tell you right now what a walleye, a wiper, and a white bass and a crappie all look like on one live scope screen, just based on how they react to a bait. So,
Interesting.
but yeah, I mean, it took me a bit to work up to it, just like anybody else. I mean, I see a lot of guys out there that have a $60,000 boat and $15K worth of electronics, and they still suck at fishing. You know what I mean? You got to get out there and learn it.
Certainly possible. Time on the water. So very cool. So we're going to be, throwing your website up on the screen there. So people in your area, not only can they do a guided fishing trip with you, but you will hop onto their boat and help them get all dialed in with their electronics and teach them for a couple of hours. That's very cool.
Yep.
So something, Brian, that I had mentioned to you before this interview was that we want to offer some tips to everybody watching. And I said, hey, let's do, it's springtime. The bass are really starting to get active here in the Midwest. Let's do a top 5 tips for catching big bass this time of year in early spring. We're into April right now. And you said, I can do that. But to be upfront, I'm really not doing much largemouth fishing. So the bass that I'm going to talk about are, what you said, smallmouth.
Yeah, we'll go smallmouth, hybrids, white bass, stuff like that. But
that's typically what you're guiding for.
No, I mean, I always say early spring, late fall. If you're looking for your personal best for whatever, that's probably when you're going to catch it. Like March into mid to end of April, and then here in our country, like mid-October through almost Thanksgiving, where those fish are either on a pre-spawn situation or they're on a fall feed bag situation. So that like right now, smallmouth, the only thing we ever truly combat in this part of the country, pre-spawn time is rain, dirty water, reservoirs. The lake's coming up. They're pulling water from the lakes. That has a huge effect on what the fish are doing at any point in time. My favorite smallmouth bite that I could ever want ever is a jerkbait bite. But that being said, if you've got less than a foot of visibility, you're probably not going to catch them on a jerkbait. You know what I mean? You got to be counting rocks real slow with a tube, a Ned rig, or a wigglewort, or something like that. Any sort of hunting crankbait like a rock crawler. And then in the fall, we're not really dealing with that stuff. If we get a cold front in the fall, it usually fires those fish up to like, okay, it's happening. Winter's happening. We gotta put the feed bag on. Whereas when the water's warming up in the springtime, we get a cold front, and those fish are like, actually, I don't really want to eat. I don't like this. And then the lake comes up 4 feet, and then it's muddy, and then they start drawing water from the dam, and then it's like nobody knows what's going on. So that being said, it all depends. Like springtime, bass fishing, doesn't matter what it is, smallmouth, largemouth. If you can get on as soon as that water gets over 40 degrees, which is my comfort level. I know there's a lot of guys in the Ozarks area who are comfortable fishing in 38, 40 degree water, jerkbait, A-rig, something like that, or even just flipping docks with a jig. But you just need the clear water. And that's all, it's like where I'm from too, up north. It's like that. If I just got back from Wisconsin last week fishing walleyes in the Fox River that feeds Green Bay. And if you get rain and that water muddies up, you got to drop that bait right on the fish's face. And that you want that cleaner water so that fish can dial in on that. And smallmouth are sight feeders. Smallmouth can feed from up to 50 feet away or track a bait from up to 50 feet away. And that down here, it's tough. It's, I love fishing a crankbait and chucking and whining as much as the next guy. But if I can catch them on a jerkbait, I mean, there's nothing. Both of my personal best smallmouth come on a jerkbait. So, but as far as top 5 baits, just like what I said before, big
top
time.
5 for
So
best.
jerkbait, some sort of dragging bait. So, that's one. I love finesse fishing. So dragging a tube, like a 2.5 to 3.5 inch tube. As much as I hate to say it, a Ned rig, I hate that stupid thing, but dang it catches fish, especially smallmouth. Something super sneaky and subtle, especially on pressured water, because that, again, we're fishing 7,000 acre lakes that fish real small, and those fish see a lot of baits. So you got to be a little bit sneakier. If you've still got cold water, throw an A-rig. In Kansas, unfortunately, we're only allowed 2 hooks. So you're throwing 2 hooks with 3 dummies, which doesn't really make sense, but I've caught them on an A-rig, flipping a jig. And then I don't know. I feel like I named like 7 in that. So we'll just go with that.
That's okay. So you really think that it's during those days and those weeks that the water is the most clear right now, also is when people are going to be able to do the most damage and get those bigger sizes.
Yeah, and it like right now, I feel like we're really behind on water temps. Like today, for example, we had 45 to 47 degree water temps, which we should be well over 50 right now, and the water's muddy. So anybody who bass fishes knows cold, muddy water, you're potentially probably going to have a pretty tough day. So you just got to get something right in front of their face. But I'm sure there's probably guys out there that are watching like, why go out and catch them on a rattle trap any old day out there, But that's just my experience. That's why fishing rules, because you can do whatever you want. If you have success, great. You don't have to do what everyone else is doing.
Let's talk about some of the successes you've had as a guide over, let's just say, the last year. What are some of the most impressive things you've been able to pull onto the boat for some of your clients?
It was a really good fall last year for giant smallmouth. It's like fall is usually, I can almost guarantee, like mid-October through almost Thanksgiving, that we're just fishing for the hybrid striped bass. But we had kind of a weird fall where your bite windows were really small. And so we'd start out the morning with that bite window on the hybrids. And then, if we got some sort of west wind blow the water into the dam, because our main lake and both smallmouth lakes actually run directly east-west. You could run up there and just throw a square bill and just rail on big smallmouth. And the lake that I got on closest to my house, it doesn't have tons of numbers of smallmouth, but the one because they don't get much pressure, the ones that are in there are really big. So we had on that lake 3 fish over 5, and the biggest one was actually one that I caught on my day off. My one day off that week, I went out and caught one that was almost 6 pounds, which for Northeast Kansas is like massive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where I'm from, when we go up to Door County and Sturgeon Bay in Wisconsin, that's just your average. That's like kind of what you're setting the bar at, is like a 6 pounder, and then obviously 7 to 8. But that was my biggest, and then we had 2 other customers on that lake that hit fish over 5, several 4.5s, and then on the nuclear power plant lake, we had 2 over 5, 3 over 4, and that was in a span of 2 days. And those were both regular customers that I said, if we're going smallmouth fishing, it's a trophy hunt right now, and there's not, you're not going to just go throw a Ned rig and catch a bunch of 12 inchers. You're probably only going to have a few bites, and they're going to be big. And we made it happen. So wipers, big wipers are always hybrids, wipers, whatever you want to call them. But when that's, like I said, smallmouth are my number one favorite fish to chase, right up next to walleyes. And when we can go out in Northeast Kansas and get on a big smallmouth bite between 4.5 and 6 pounds, there's nothing better. So
outstanding.
That was pretty fun.
So real quick, I want to touch on your YouTube channel. Like I said, over 20,000 subscribers at this point and growing daily. It's called Kansas Angling Experience. That's what your business is called as well.
Yep.
What are some of the things that you've noticed that your subscribers really react well to? I know you mentioned you're kind of becoming the Garmin LiveScope authority. What else?
I think it's more of just like YouTube has gotten so saturated with more from a fishing standpoint, just entertainment. I've fished with several big YouTubers like Guggen guys, for example, that they're awesome dudes off camera, but as soon as the camera's on, they're like a 1950s TV personality. The most cringy, just like, I know it resonates for a lot of the younger crowd, which that's amazing, as far as like the younger generation of fish or anglers coming up. But like from my standpoint, I just don't watch that much YouTube anymore because it's gotten so cringy. So like for me, because YouTube is not a full-time job for me, and I'm not trying to grow the channel to 100,000 subscribers so I can be rich from YouTube, I'm just myself. And that sometimes I swear. And I'm just the same guy that you see in my videos is the same guy you get on a guide trip in my boat, where I'm personable and just easygoing, and there's nothing cringy and weird and fake about it, because I feel like a lot of YouTube has just become that. And I feel like a lot of the guys that I know right now who are trying to get into YouTube are trying to do the same thing, where they've got weird little sayings that they're pulling from other YouTubers, and I don't know. It's hard to explain because I don't want to
chased out. Let's go get chased out of a lake and get somebody yelling at us on camera. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or just like clickbaity thumbnails, or like you could have a 15-minute video and never catch a fish, but you talked the whole time about literally nothing or made little jokes,
right?
Just hoping for clicks and stuff like that. So that's why I say if I'm lucky to put out 1 to 3 or 4 videos a month, it's because I could have gone out, 10 times, and if the bite wasn't happening or there wasn't educational value to throw into that video, I'm not going to put a video up. It's plain and simple. Like, it has to have structure, it has to have context, and educational value. And that's always something that I've kind of prided myself in, as far as I've got to catch fish, and I've got to educate people on what I'm doing, and have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Not just, I went out and caught 3 fish and then talked about it in my garage afterwards. That's just, I don't know. But that's my personal preference. So
I appreciate the work that you do put into your videos, where you seem to do this a lot, where you're showing on one side of the screen what's happening on the Garmin, and then the other side of the screen is you. And just from somebody who does a little bit of video editing, I know the time it takes and the commitment to make sure all of this stuff is synced up right. Especially because you get off the boat. You've got hours of footage on multiple little tiny SIM cards, and now you gotta, just to dump your fishing trip from your GoPro onto your computer takes hours. It takes
Right.
hours for that video to get there. Then you got to get it into your editing software. And then you get to the point where, okay, you figure out what I want to use and sync it up perfectly. And you do a fantastic job with that. So
Appreciate it.
I applaud you. And that's something that the average watcher of your YouTube channel has no idea the effort that goes into that. But I fully do and commend you for the work you put into it.
Truly. Yeah, I appreciate it. And like I said, I mean, it comes from just having done this video editing and stuff for so long. And even back when I was doing the skateboarding stuff, I would go and film stuff and I would come home and I would edit it the same night. I mean, this is when I was like in, my teen years, I'd stay up till 2, 3 in the morning until that
Mhm.
video was done. And now it's the same with the fishing stuff because it's all in my head. It's all fresh. I
Yeah.
know in my head how I want that video structured.
Mhm.
And I know my fiance can attest to this too because I just won't stop. I can't stop. If I have 3 cards sitting ready to go, I want that footage edited right now
Yeah.
because it'll all just go.
Mhm.
So that's just from me wanting to put out the best possible content that I feel I can give to the viewership.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And you've also grown a very large Instagram following as well, which I'm sure is just great exposure for your business.
yeah, no, and I mean it's just all for fun. It's being a fishing guide, your only marketing is the pictures that you post. Nobody wants to read your 3-paragraph story of how you caught them. They just want to look at your 10 to 15 pictures of what the fish look like.
Let me see how big of white bass this guy's catching, and I will decide if I'm going to pay him $500.
Right. Yeah.
One of those things.
I feel like there's a little of both, like people that want to, read about the day. And there are some posts that do better than others, from
Mhm.
like a reach or engagement
Of course.
standpoint. But, it's some days we just have better days than others and I have a great story to tell. Or it's like, kind of cycling back to our conversation about taking somebody's kid out for the first time or
Mhm.
taking an adult's parent out for the last time,
Yeah.
you know, kind of.
Very
And I always
important.
hold that stuff really close to me as being a fishing guide and stuff that I try to never take for granted. It's a business, but these people have all become good friends of mine. So
Final question. What is your problem with catfish?
oh, I have no problem with them. But that being said, if somebody reaches out to me and says, "Do you do catfish trips?" I'm not going
Mhm.
to say, "Well, of course, I would love to take your money."
You just don't
Um,
want to, not into it.
no, no. I'm just number one, I like my boat carpet too much. Yeah, keeping things a little bit more clean. But we catch them on accident all the time. We had like a 55-pound flathead last April on a 3-inch swim bait wiper fishing.
Wow.
Um, And then several of the lakes that I guide on also have amazing populations of blue catfish. And
Mhm.
if anyone listening knows anything about blue catfish, they're typically more of a suspending fish versus, and even channel cats too, versus like a flathead that's always towards the bottom. So those catfish, the blue cats mix in a lot with the wipers, the white bass, the walleyes when they're suspended feeding on gizzard shad. So if we're throwing a swim bait or something like that, you're probably going to run into one at some point.
Interesting.
But I have several friends in the industry here locally that are amazing catfish legends that I'm happy to recommend. But I have no problem with them. I just don't want them touching my boat carpet or anything. I don't want to
I
clean
got
them
you.
either.
I got you. And that's a totally different kind of fishing too. I mean,
Big
that's kind
time
of
it is. Yep.
throw it out and let's just sit around and wait for a rod to bend, I guess.
Right. Which I have a lot of respect for what those guys do. And like I said, guys that fish on a tournament standpoint who are
Mhm.
absolute hammers and they always cash a check and they always manage to find them. If you put me on the Missouri River right now, I'd probably be more scared that I'm going to sink my boat on a wing dam than I am, set a rod out for a 3-pound channel catfish.
Right. That's funny, man. So something you also mentioned to me before we started rolling was that you said very rarely are your guided trips about largemouth bass, which I was very surprised. And you had a great reason for that. And just tell everybody why that is.
Yeah, it's more of just I mean, I hope that there are fishing guides potentially listening to this and I have a lot of respect for guys that guide on let's like Lake Fork, for example.
Mhm.
I feel like it's really hard to go to Lake Fork with a spinning rod in your hand. That those guys that guide on lakes where you're flipping deep trees or dragging a ledge or something like that, or throwing like a 6XD plus, you can't do that on a spinning rod. But what if you get somebody in your boat that's never touched a bait caster before? Are you ready to blow out an entire spool of 15 to 20 pound fluorocarbon? Because I'm not.
Right.
So, but the majority of the fishing that we do, we can do with a spinning rod. And it's like I said at the beginning when we were first talking, it's like, I'm not going to show up, or I'm not going to have somebody show up that says they've never fished, take them to a stretch of docks, give them a 7'6" heavy bait caster and say, flip that tungsten right up underneath those floats. Back corner of the dock, just like Lake of the Ozarks, you got to hit that back corner. That's 2 hours of your guide trip right there, is teaching them how to flip a bait caster. And if somebody
Right.
wants to do that, that's all fine and great. But if we're on a good smallmouth bite, I can give them 5 spinning rods and throw a swim bait, a square bill, a tube, a Ned rig, anything like that. A small square bill, a big square bill. So that's kind of my thing. But
Gotcha.
at the same time, on our lakes, if you're fishing for smallmouth, you're probably going to catch a largemouth too. But that's
Sure.
why I say I've got a lot of respect for those guys on big lakes like Ozarks, that we're going to go flip docks. But I also feel like that's a different clientele. Those guys who book those trips with Table Rock and Ozarks guys probably already know how to use a bait caster. They just want to know how to fish the lakes better. So I'd feel more comfortable in that situation, giving somebody one of my bait casters to go flip docks and not blowing out an entire spool of fluorocarbon.
Totally makes sense, Brian. So Kansas Angling Experience is the name of your YouTube channel. Throw out your website and everything else so people can find you.
Kansas Angling Experience is branded across the board: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, kansasangling.experience.com. It's got my rates under there as well as the availability calendar. Again, the YouTube channel is just for fun, but I do have a whole entire Garmin and live scope playlist on the channel with live scope settings, down view settings, side scan settings, how I use my maps and everything like that, to try and give you a better baseline for how to set your units up. But Garmin makes it real easy to just turn the units on and start using them on auto settings. But that it's all just for fun. Sometimes I swear, but I'm the most real person you'll meet on YouTube without being cringy and stuff like that. So
It's a great channel. He's absolutely right. It's a great channel. I enjoy it. I think you guys watching will enjoy it too. Brian, I want to thank you for being a guest on the program here. We got to get some of these baits in your hands for everybody else watching. If you want to get some of these Tackle HD baits in your hands, if you're in Missouri or Arkansas, look on the Tackle HD Facebook page, because we just put up a list of all the Walmart locations that have these displays. You can go pick stuff up. Of course, the website right down below, tacklehd.com, has everything. We'll ship it right to you. Brian, anything else before we go?
no, I appreciate the time, man. I'm really glad we got to do this. I've been following Tackle HD for a while. So when you and Aaron reached out, that was really cool.
Fantastic. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching the Tackle HD podcast. Please like and subscribe this video and head on over to Kansas Angling Experience and give them a subscription too. Thank you guys for watching. Brian, thanks, man. Have a good one.
Yep. Thanks, Joe. You too.